When you hear the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, we had everything we needed in a black village. I must have had 100 mothers, 100 fathers.
I think that there is a good deal of anger and frustration about moving black people out of this area.
There is a heritage of resistance. There are people who put their faith forward and are doing their best to hang on to an increasingly difficult environment in Georgetown.
I was born in those apartments across from Rose Park Playground. That was 84 years ago. It was a one-bedroom apartment. My mom and dad were, trying to make it back in that day, 1939, and things were a little tough for folks. Having been raised here in Georgetown, this was a village. It was a black village. We had a black barber, a black shoe shine, a parlor, a black drugstore. I've been a member here since cradle. If I did something here at Mount Zion, before I got to my house at 3 or 4 blocks away, the mamas and daddies got the word down the street before you got home. When we moved out, I think I was about 8, so I wasn't privy to that, what was happening.
Georgetown's, in its earliest phases, it's a tobacco port. Black folk were central to its growing. And they also provided a significant amount of labor to the College of Georgetown, that is now Georgetown University. And as more ancillary businesses developed in Georgetown, black folk with skills and seeking opportunity came and lived in various parts of Georgetown. You can see that Georgetown is essentially a layer cake. Down below, let's say K Street, and then you have a higher level, M Street, and then above that, you have what was called Georgetown Heights. This is the southeastern part of a black community of more than 900 people called Herring Hill.
And the reason it was called Herring Hill was because Rock Creek Park, it was like a river, it was deep. And underneath a P Street, the herring fish would run in the spring or so, and people would go down with nets and just bring up fish. Blacks in Georgetown did not own the property. There was only, that I knew of, a group along P Street.
My grandfather, when he bought this house, his 2 best friends bought the houses on either side. There was almost an extended family. The purchase price was $3,500. Now, I'm sure $3,500 in 1927 was a lot of money, but still, in comparison to what the houses go for now in this area, there's some significant capital gains, right? My great-great-grandfather, I think it was known as the black mayor of Georgetown. His name was Charles Turner. He and his twin brother were freed, and I found the papers, and I want to say their owner received $92 in compensation. He eventually becomes a homeowner in Georgetown, multiple homes, works for the federal government, is the leader of the Republican Party here in, well, Lincoln was a Republican. When we talk about, the American dream, I mean, this is really the fulfillment of it.
This is the oldest congregation in Washington, D.C. In those days, their help or slaves came to church, but they had to sit in the balcony, and they could not have black ministers or black preachers. So they decided to establish their own church.
The Mount Zion Church was the church that my grandfather belonged to. The Female Union Band Society, my grandmother was a member of that. But they brought property when black women or women in general weren't able to do that. They used a lawyer as a proxy so that collectively they had a place to bury their family members. My grandfather took me up there as a young kid because he wanted to show me, look, you have family here, this is important, this is your legacy. It was a cemetery, and it was also overgrown. There were bushes and branches, and I was frightened, but I did know that it was something that was very important. Still on the property, a still standing structure was used on the Underground Railroad. It was basically a crypt that bodies were held in, particularly in the winter when the ground was too cold, it was frozen over, so you couldn't dig. So they would store dead bodies in there.
People would hide in the vault, until they could move out. Nobody wanted to go in amongst the bodies and look for them.
My father, being a descendant of the Female Union Band Society members, had the property designated a historical site and then embarked on a lifelong battle of preservation. For a long time, the church took a significant role in the basic maintenance, but over the years, it became more of a burden, and a foundation was established that brought the two properties together under one management structure, and then worked to raise funds, which has been a challenge. I think that there is a good deal of anger and frustration about moving Black people out of this area. But for those of us who have remained, I think we've tried to focus that anger in a way that we can leverage it to, the benefit of preservation, restoration, highlighting our history, and continuing to hold on and say, hey, we're here, and we're not going to just be forgotten and thrown aside.
Rose Park was the community center. That was where all the happenings were.
Rose Park had a baseball team, a Black baseball team called the Rose Park Warriors. Two of the baddest young ladies in tennis lived in this neighborhood, and that's Margaret and Romania Peters. They were the, if you will, Venus and Serena of their day.
Black leagues playing from around the city would come and play there. And just so happened we lived across the street, right? I just got out the house and crossed the street. And, we were on the playground all day.
Rose Park was a particularly wonderful focal point because it was integrated.
The city wanted to enforce Jim Crow. Well, certainly the Black folk, they changed one of the signs from the Department of Recreation, and so they punctuated it so that it read recreation. And so everyone that wanted to could come.
The housing was not good, but we lived comfortably. The church was going to hearings and all, protesting what appeared to be deportation. I call it a migration in and a deportation out. The folks who owned the property appeared to condemn the property, take it over, and rebuild it. As they change codes, it makes it easy to say, you're not up to standards. Towards O Street, it was Poplar Alley. It was an alley. The houses were in such bad shape, rats, outdoor toilets, and all of that. Right behind, backing up to those houses. I just knew that we were going to move out of the one-bedroom apartment, and we were going to move over to, say, 18th Street, Northwestern. We were going to be in a house, and I was going to have a room. It wasn't a big deal to me, but because I didn't really probably understand what was happening.
My aunt, her family lived down the street on P Street, and unfortunately, they didn't own the property, and that property was condemned.
That's why the city cannot take a neutral position, because it actively helped to dispossess Black people in Georgetown and in Southwest and on Capitol Hill and a number of other places. They were chess pieces. could be moved around on the board any place else, but not with a obvious or stated desire to leave them no worse than they were.
When you go and ride down the streets and you look at a house that's sitting in the middle of a bunch of other houses, and it has a nice front, it has iron on the window and iron grate on the front door, that's the first one in. That's the first white family coming in. The cost of property is, unreachable for a lot of blacks. The little houses right next to here going for $1 million. Back when our people owned them, they were called shanties and shacks.
We had a second house here on this block. At the time, whatever they sold it for, which I believe was under 6 figures, it was a fuel for future generation, which, as it turned out, was me. The 3 families still live here, and we still consider each other, close. I don't have any kids, and the neighbor on the right side, she doesn't have any kids. And it's something that, obviously, I think about from time to time now, because I am adding years to my life.
Mount Zion is my home. I was developed here. I can come here and still feel the love of the church. I stand on the back of a lot of people who suffered and died and bled for my freedom. I have not forgotten my history.